Our next guest, I've been excited about this ever since I heard she was coming, comes from the world of high stakes and exciting professional sports. So please welcome Bethany Donaphin, SVP and Head of League Operations at the WNBA. Bethany, you can sit right here. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
The WNBA has been a pretty extraordinary story. You're a player.
I was.
In the WNBA. And now you run league operations. I'm curious, from the moment you joined the league as a player to now, when you're experiencing an extraordinary amount of growth, what do you think are the most marked changes between when you joined the league as a player and now?
There's so many. It's actually really hard to point to one, but I think it's a very different player experience. When I played, we flew commercial and coach, and we shared hotel rooms with our teammates, and we practiced in shared college and recreational facilities, and now our players fly charter and they stay at five-star hotels and they have state-of-the-art facilities and arenas. And I think the intention around walking with them through the continuum of their experience as players in the league, that's something that's really different from the time they transition into the league as rookies to when they are preparing for their next chapters after they stop playing. We're with them along the way. Yeah. I think there's a big difference in the product quality, both from the sense of the actual on-court play to even how our fans can engage with our digital products and what it looks like to come to a website. The fact that there's an app, we didn't have that back when I was playing over 20 years ago. And I think another major shift has been just in how visible and accessible they are because of social media. And I think that's probably the most principal change is that right. You don't have to go to an arena to engage and build a relationship with our players. You can do it online. And I think because of who our players are and because of how they engage and use their platforms, there's just, I think, this growing coolness and impact on society and this cultural relevance that I don't think players had that right. a very long time ago. So.
Well, why don't we see a little bit of that? I think you brought a sizzle reel that's sort of encapsulates the current WNBA. Can we roll that?
Congratulations to Indiana.
The Indiana Fever select Caitlin Clark. University of Iowa. Angel Reed, LSU.
For the 2024 WNBA All-Stars.
I think that does a good job of it's really got like an extraordinary vibe, the WNBA. And you're right in the thick of it, right? The playoffs start Sunday?
Sunday.
So, and you've got, what, 6 teams already or is it 5 teams already in the playoffs, I think?
7 that have already
7
qualified,
have made it now, yeah.
2 more vying for the last playoff
Right. So
spot.
it's an exciting time. Maybe this is not a fair question, but I'm curious. Do you compare yourself to other professional sports leagues? And if so, how do you compare? Do you have any metrics or, ways of saying, we are on par, below, or above par to other leagues?
Well, I will say I think it's natural for us to be compared to other professional sports leagues, but we're really different in a few different ways. Well, one, in our age alone. I think the NFL, MLB, NHL, all over 100 years old. The NBA is 79 years old. We're 29. And for us to be on par from a social engagement standpoint, from a viewership standpoint, for us to have the social traction that we have in the sport zeitgeist, it's pretty incredible. And we try not to compare ourselves too much. I think it's natural, particularly because of the relationship with the NBA. But our athletes are also really different. They have a lot of dimension. They're moms, they're entrepreneurs, they hold master's degrees. And so when you get to to the point I raised earlier about engagement with them, it's a really compelling experience because of who they are. And they're interesting people that are starting to get the recognition, not just for who they are off the court, but because of the elite athletes that they are as well.
Yeah. So our theme, it's right here behind you, of integrating and executing to win. In your business role at the WNBA, can you tell us how the team there has prepared for the kind of explosive growth you've seen over the last few years? Because it really was almost a tip, right? In terms of all of a sudden, you just...
This hockey stick growth.
Yeah, it was a hockey stick growth. So what did you do to prepare for that and to be ready?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a series of decisions that were made 5 or 6 years ago where that I think led to us building the foundation that allowed this growth to happen for us to actually enjoy it and not be crippled by it.
Right.
We had, in 2019, we did some work with a brand agency, and one of the key takeaways was that the WNBA was a brand in crisis. So Jennifer raised a point around action and awareness and the difference between them. I think a lot of people knew what the WNBA is, but they weren't engaging with it. They weren't taking an action against that awareness. And it was also, one of the key insights we also got was that it was a lonely and difficult experience to be a WNBA fan. And so it's like not knowing where the games are going to be, what network they would be on, what day, what time of day, and not having the ability to connect with other people that when sports is so much about community. So we did a complete overhaul of the brand. We brought the players into the process. The design of Logo Woman, it was really intentional. If you look at her, our players were changing in the way that they were playing in terms of the ability to stretch the floor and play multiple positions, bigs going out to the perimeter. So the players were longer and more agile, and that's reflected in the brand and the way that she's shaped. And they even weighed in on things like her hair and what moves she should be making. So it was a really collaborative process to even unveil the branding. And we thought about the first ad spots that we did, wanting to have a female gaze on the female athlete and depict them as they feel that they could be most authentically depicted. And so those little things that happened in terms of how we brought the refresh of the brand to life in 2019. So by the fast forward, Commissioner Engelbert comes on, first commissioner in the history of the WNBA, first female CEO of Deloitte, comes in, and we go through this business transformation, really founded in being player first, driving value for our stakeholders, and engaging fans. And how do we just always keep those three pillars as our North Star? And that led to us, I think a pivotal moment for us, an inflection point for the league, was having the 2020 season. We were in the middle of a global...
Because that was in doubt, right?
It was very much in doubt. In that point, we're making that decision to play after Adam Silver had already shut down the sports world, essentially, and pausing the NBA season at that point. And going into what we call the bubble, the WNBA bubble season in Florida, making that happen with all of the uncertainty that we had felt like a really big risk at that time, but it meant being out of the sports landscape for 20 months had we not done that. And because we did that, and because the players wanted to use that platform to address the racial reckoning that was happening at the same time, there was just this incredible attention, and people were home, and we had games on every other night. And so the ratings, you started to see the ratings go up, and then every year we started to build on that. I think one last kind of foundational pivotal piece was doing a capital raise in 2022 that allowed us to actually generate some capital to invest in the business. And that allowed us to, Satya was talking about building capabilities for where you want to be. that was one of the things that we really needed to do. We didn't have an in-house marketing function. We didn't have an in-house sales function. So we hired our first CMO. We hired our first chief growth officer. We overhauled our entire digital platform and all the infrastructure behind that to be able to have those numbers that you see there in terms of engagement with our app and people wanting to come to the WNBA and watch games on League Pass, and really starting to be able to appeal to digital native consumers who want to engage in the WNBA, but want to do it the way that they need to do it. And so those things, I think, allowed us, and then you get to 2024, and it's this confluence of, you've got, NIL, this name, image, and likeness rulings that allow college athletes to have sponsorships while they're in college, and they're coming, so then you've got that, you've got this growing interest in women's sports generally, not just women's basketball. And then you have this transformational draft class with Caitlin Clark, and all those things converge to create that hockey stick moment that you just talked about.
Right. Well, and you mentioned, I think it's interesting, the NILs, coming, now you've got players coming from college who already have sponsors, attached to them. You mentioned fans first. How do you do that? Because it strikes me that's very similar to what we're hearing all afternoon about focusing on consumers and consumer insights, doing the ethnographies, understanding what people want by going into their homes and their workplaces. How did you think about doing that in terms of putting those fans first?
I would think it's understanding that who our fans are. We have this really, I think, unique quality in that we have a really diverse fan base. We have kind of traditional sports watchers who want to sit down and you look at our ESPN viewership, it's still largely white and largely male. But then you also have this kind of, these Gen Zers and young millennials who want to be connected to brands that share values with them. And then you have families and young girls, and then young athletes who are playing sports, both girls and boys. So, understanding like the breadth of the consumer segments that we actually have, and understanding how do they want to engage with the league? How do they want to come to a game? Do they want to just engage in social? How do you move them from wanting to engage just on social to actually coming into an arena and buying merch and becoming a season ticket holder? So I think understanding how those segments behave and what they're coming to the league for. Some people are coming just to see incredible team basketball and what many call, and what I call, the purest form of basketball. Some are coming for that, but some are coming for the experience of being around people that they share values with. Mm-hmm. And how do we create what they need in the various places where we show up, whether that's in arena or online or on television.
Right. It also strikes me that what you've done at the WNBA feels like a category growth story, right? You're not stealing share.
Right.
You're building new relationships and growing the whole category.
Yeah.
Was that a intentional goal, or did you realize you were doing it and then double down?
I mean, I think we knew that there was there are people that we had that understood like what women's basketball is and may be familiar with the WNBA, but I think we felt like it was so untapped. Like there's so many people that understand what the WNBA is, but they don't know how to integrate it into their life. Like that's one of the things that's so impactful about the work that you all do and the brands that P&G has is like they're intrinsic to the way that you go about your day. And we didn't have that, and it was something we're still working toward. But I think that understanding like what would it take to grow the people that are just interested, that just want to check us out. And I think that's the intentional work that our chief marketing officer is doing. I think that a perfect kind of category growth story is the Valkyries. We have our first expansion team in 17 years, playing in San Francisco now, and they've been incredible. When I think about a question to you, I'm curious if people know this. What percentage of Warriors season ticket holders do you think are also Valkyries season ticket holders? Want to venture a guess?
20%?
It's less than 5%.
Wow. So that's category growth.
So, and if you go to, and it's something that the Valkyries have been masterful at, is understanding their market. And if you go to a Warriors game and you go to a Valkyries game, they're both really great sports experience, but they're very different. And I think that's part of what we're hoping to do as we continue to expand.
Can you unpack that vibe a little bit? Like how I mean, it's both like extraordinary athleticism and great, basketball, but what's the difference?
I think there's something palpable about a group of people rooting for female athletes that, I think there just hasn't been a lot of opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And, you go into the arena. I went to a game last week. The Valkyries won by like 30, and every fan was still in the seat at the end of the game. And you're used to seeing people file out by the, beginning of the fourth quarter when the game is like that. And the energy around their mascot unveiling a couple of weeks ago, where they put the Valkyries. There's an incredible story about Norse warriors, and they unveiled their mascot and put an egg in the plaza in front of Chase Center, and they sat it there for 3 days, and everybody's like, "What is this? What's happening?" And it hatches and becomes a raven that is now their mascot, Violet, who is really interconnected with this Norse, mythology, story and narrative behind the Valkyries brand. And so it's like those kinds of things that they have that are just really, it shows the fans that they're really thinking about this in a way that is interesting and intentional. And they've tapped into the fact that market is full of women's basketball fans. I'm biased about Stanford having played there, but there's an incredible history in Stanford women's basketball. There's incredible history in Cal women's basketball.
Yeah.
Joe Lacob owned an ABL team in a league that preceded the WNBA in San Jose. So they've tapped into that and grown the category.
Yeah, absolutely, they have. As a former Bay Area person, I'm very happy that that's where you went for your first expansion, but there is more coming, right? So how do you decide where to go, how many to do? I think, how many are coming? 3?
We have 2 more coming next year and 3 more in 28, 29, and 30.
Yeah, so it's 5 new expansion teams.
5 new expansion teams coming.
Right. And so how do you prepare for something like that?
Well, it's funny. We did. These are marked. So next year we'll have the Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo. There's the insight right there, actually. Well, we dipped our toe in the Canadian market, and we knew there was an interest there. There's actually a rich women's basketball history in Canada, and we did our first game outside of the U.S. in 15 years at the time, and we did it in Toronto. We did another one in Edmonton. We just had our first regular season game in Vancouver a few weeks ago, and so we knew we had done enough market research to understand that there was something there, and then we went, and then you could just see the explosion. That it's something palpable when you're there and you can engage with fans, and our commissioner had people coming up to us. You've made my dream come true. I've always wanted to be able to go to a professional women's basketball game in Canada. So the market was ready, and now they're going to have a team. Portland's an interesting story in that we had a WNBA team there. With an ownership change, they decided not to keep the WNBA team. But there's an incredible women's sports story in Portland. And you look at the Thorns, the NWSL team that's there, leading that league in attendance, and the Sports Bra, which is the first sports bar dedicated to solely watching women's sports. So we could tell there was enough
it's
there.
It's called the Sports Bra?
It's called the Sports Bra.
I just want to make sure I heard that right.
It's called the Sports Bra. And so the market was ready, and in both cases, you see like the preliminary deposits for first season ticket holders are already, for Portland around 10,000. So
wow.
Similar to what the Valkyries did. So. Yeah. And then, we'll take a pause for a year, thankfully. Operationally, I'm thankful for that at least. And then we'll get into Cleveland, Detroit, and Philly.
Yeah. Now, the global market has always been sort of we've had executives from the NFL here, from women's soccer, and they talk about the global market a lot. Is this something that you're thinking about outside, beyond Canada?
Definitely. And we're only now being able to really sit down, and there's been so much growth, and there's been so much that's changed so rapidly to really to flesh out what our global strategy is going to be. But it will involve going and testing and seeing in smaller executions, like what does it look like when we bring our players to Asia. We had Sabrina Ionescu, is one of the more popular players in the WNBA, just did a tour in Asia, and the response was astounding. And so we know that there's interest. It's just what do we do to capitalize on it and venture into markets in the right way. How do we make our games available in more languages? How do we think about bringing global games? So, that's a full-fledged operation and complex, and we want to do it in the right timing, in the right way. So, but a fifth of our league is international. The number 2 pick in the draft this year is a French player. She's like 6'7", and she can dunk, and she's agile, and like nobody's seen anybody like her before, and she's 19. And so people, I think there's talent. To continue to reference the Valkyries, that half of their roster is international, and so when we think about growing the number of roster spots that we are going to grow, like, we have to tap into new talent pools, and so international is going to be a really big piece of that, because we know there's great talent in all over the world, and how do we make them want to come to the WNBA and make it a compelling experience for them?
And the fans and the players are your ambassadors to your growth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming and sharing your insights with us, and wish you a great playoff season.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for coming to Signal.
Thank you.